Today marked the 9th annual Kick for Cass 11-hour soccer match held by Shine on Cass. More than 500 soccer players came together today to honor Messalonskee Eagle Cassidy Charette at Thomas College. Cassidy tragically passed away in 2014 in a hayride accident. Since then, the Charette family and friends came together to form the Shine on Cass Foundation, created to honor the spirits and continue the work and encourage others to live the legacy of Cassidy. Monica Charette spoke about how Shine on Cass evolved.
You know, I think Shine on Cass evolved from many people who love Cassidy. It's not just me, it's not just our family. She just carried a light inside of her that she just shared with everyone around her. And I think her kindness is her legacy, and her friends wanted to make sure that that legacy continues. And, you know, look around you. We have over 500 people here. Her light is infinite.
To donate or find more information about Shine on Cass Foundation, go to shineoncass.com.